Oh my goodness, folks, what's up? Hello, how are ya? Little Robert Plant there. Little mellow Robert Plant. Sunday morning. Keeping it easy. It's always on Sunday morning, folks. But I do it all day long. This is Michael in the wee hours of the night. On the graveyard shift. With good coffee. With your daily trivia question. Yet once again. It's good stuff, man. I got to see Robert Plant in concert. I think it was 2016 in Raleigh. One of the best shows I have ever seen in my life. Oh my gosh, I had third row seats. It was great. Just great. I got some good video clips of it too, until a security guard asked me to please stop doing that. And he was a large fellow, so I was nice enough to, do what he told me to do. Anyways, I digress. Getting right to the trivia question. Here we go. The answer to the previous trivia question was smoking or cigarettes. Now, the whole manner of banning cigarettes advertising on television as well as radio was the result of what historically and legally went down on the books and in history as the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act. And this was inaugural. This was groundbreaking, and it was long-standing. It was sustainable without question. Some of the things that we see today as far as smoking, or we don't see for that matter, I should say, came of this legislation. Now, this was when President Nixon signed it into law on April Fool's Day of 1970, which, of course, was the focus of the trivia question. Now, not only did this federal legislation ban cigarette ads on TV and radio, but it also is the very reason why we have some of those Surgeon General warnings, right? The great Surgeon General and those famous little pesky warnings on the cigarette packs. This is what came of the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act, in addition to banning advertisements, right? So the law had multiple effects against smoking and dealing with children and their exposure to advertising and cigarettes in general. Now, by 1970, one of the reasons is that by 1970, pretty much everyone realized that smoking was not good for you. They realized it was addictive. They realized that the marketing involved was specifically and very strategically directed towards the concept of getting people hooked on their product as early as possible. And, of course, that meant kids. That meant teenagers, right? They were not stupid, and the public was soon coming around to that concept as well. Both parties knew what they were doing, right? So it was time. It was time to sign something into law about the dangers and the hazards of cigarette smoking. And at the time of the Surgeon General's report and the subsequent passing of the Cigarette Smoking Act, the tobacco companies were spending, check this out, this is some of the research that you find when you start to uncover history and trivia questions like this. The tobacco companies were spending at the time $250 million a year on advertising. So their whole advertising campaign and platform and purpose, right, was specific, right? It was very, very strategic. They pumped a lot of money into getting people hooked on these cancer sticks. 3/5 of this money went for TV commercials up until 1970 when all that changed. Along with this variable, the 1970 Act was controversial. Of course, that was the focus of the trivia question. And that was controversial for several other reasons, right? Let's check off these boxes. At the time, tobacco advertising accounted for 8% of the entire advertising revenue of the television network. 8% might not seem like a lot off the top of your brain, but when that equates to advertising revenue on television, that is a lot of money, folks. And I believe, if my research serves me correctly, that percentage was probably higher in the 50s and 60s when smoking really caught on at that time. All right, so let's continue checking off these boxes. It was easily a $1 billion a year agricultural product. It was a crop. So people in the agriculture, the farming industry who invested and specialized in tobacco, right, had a serious problem with this law. It was a crop that the Department of Agriculture took very seriously. It was a very successful consumer product. When you bottom line things, let's face it, folks, people like to smoke. People spend, walk a mile for a Camel, right? That's where all that bottom line kind of concept came from. People spend an incredible amount of money to continue smoking cigarettes. It's a habit. It's something people just like to do, right? And they will spend the money for it. So it was taken very seriously on both sides. Okay, it generated a ton in tax revenue. Now think about that, because it still does to this day, and that's one of the reasons why the prices keep going up. Now, let me speak to this a little bit. Even though all of this, these changes in these laws and this federal legislation was being passed down, the cigarette companies agreed, as they usually do. You remember when there was this Joe Camel, which I've included a copy there in the picture there in the inserts. Remember all of that controversy where it was found that kids could recognize Joe Camel more than they could athletes or presidential people and so forth, and everybody was up in arms about that, and they did away with that type of advertising as well. The cigarette companies, they said, hey, no problem. We don't have a problem with that, because they knew that people were still going to be addicted to cigarettes, and they were still going to buy cigarettes, right? So in addition to that, on the other end of that, if you will, one of my final points was that it generated a ton in tax revenues, and like I said, it still does today. The prices keep going up. I think the last time I looked up, when I was in the checkout line, I just happened to glance over. It was like $8 a pack for good God, for like normal cigarettes, like Camels or Marlboros or something to that effect. It's an incredible amount of money. I used to smoke. I smoked 2 packs a day up until 2007, I think, something to that effect. And cigarettes were expensive then, but I'm old enough to remember when cigarettes were like $1.25 a pack, folks. So that tells you how old I am, and quite frankly, how long I smoked. I smoked for a while, but haven't picked up one of those things in a long time. So the federal and the state governments derive almost $4 billion with a B dollars a year in taxes from cigarettes. That's what my research found. Then the debate goes on and on. It's not ending anytime soon, and cigarettes aren't going away anytime soon, because like both sides of the party know, people are just going to keep smoking, right? A couple of cool geek factoids about smoking. This band that came out in 1970 for TV and radio advertising. And there are some pretty cool geek factoids. Although the tobacco company agreed to stop advertising, and I kind of went over some aspects of that, they willingly agreed to stop advertising on radio and TV because, again, they knew everybody was going to keep smoking. However, 6 radio companies claimed that the sections of the Act from 1970 violated freedom of speech. Now, the end result there being that the assertion that product advertising is less vigorously protected than other forms of speech. That was the federal courts decided that product advertising kind of has a special little place of its own, if you will, and they're not necessarily protected from freedom of speech. Not necessarily. I think they appealed that to the high court, and the high court rejected that, sent it back to federal level. The high court never really again addressed the issue of advertisement and smoking. Most, if not all, cigarette ads simply flipped over to magazines, and that's still the case today. You can pick up any magazine and see cigarette ads in it, quite frankly. Nixon, here's a cool geek factoid. Nixon, who signed the act into law as president, was at the time a heavy pipe smoker himself. He was smoking like 6 to 7 pipe bowls a day. So he was a tobacco user himself when he signed this into law. He was sitting there smoking his pipe and thinking about breaking into Watergate and all this. But he's not a crook, but he smokes. But you can't advertise it. Something to that effect. But it's pretty cool stuff to federal legislation to research, folks. Absolutely. All right, folks, enough about smoking cigarettes and all that good stuff. My goodness gracious. Let's get to this nice, peaceful Sunday morning and keep it easy like Sunday all day long with a brand new trivia question for April 2nd. On this day, in 1932, going back to the 30s, the first of what would go on to be 12 movies was released starring an Olympic gold medal swimmer and polo player named Johnny Westmuller as this lead character. And he was Miss Porter's main interest. And by the way, there's no need to yell about it. Have a good day, folks. See you next time. Thanks for all you do. I'm back tonight. Come join me. Bring your coffee mug. We'll get through the night together. As always, peace out.